Hi, I'm Christy Cordingley, and this is my show, The Flare Up Show, and this special episode is produced in partnership with Clarissa Burt and In the Limelight Media. I originally created this show to advocate for myself through chronic illness, but today it's grown into a wellness show that's listened to all over the world. I love to practice well-being for the whole being. So if you're ready to rise, thrive, and elevate your life, stay tuned, enjoy the show, and thanks for listening.
All right, welcome to the Flare Up Show. The show is produced by Clarissa Burt and In the Limelight Media. And today I have a very lovely guest all the way from San Diego. So Dr. Valerie Sussman is a retired pediatrician, author, artist, and a survivor of narcissistic abuse. At the age of 50, she left a 20-year emotionally abusive marriage and traded in her stethoscope and white coat for paint, glue, and toys as she discovered the power of creativity and play in healing her wounds. She is now on a mission to inspire others on their own healing journey. So welcome, Dr. Sussman. Welcome, Valerie. It's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Perfect. So let's just start off with, at the very beginning, just like a basic question, because narcissism is a word that we hear a lot, and I don't know if it's always applied accurately, but definitely there are things out there where narcissism and adjacent behaviors, it's good to define what those are. So what is narcissism anyways, and how do I really know if this issue is a narcissist and maybe, or just an emotionally immature person, for example?
It's a great question, and there is a lot of overlap, as you might imagine. The term narcissist is, as you say, it's thrown around a lot these days, sometimes accurately and sometimes not. A couple things. First of all, if you're dealing with the narcissist, it's highly unlikely they will ever get a formal diagnosis. And as a physician myself, I hate that, but because we're all about diagnoses. But a narcissist will rarely go in for help and get a actual formal diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder from a licensed medical health provider. So just right off the bat. So it kind of falls onto us to figure out if we're dealing with a narcissist or not. And, you know, the way I like to think about it is it's really a constellation of personality traits and behaviors. Generally speaking, the primary things you will see will be a sense of superiority, an extreme self-absorption, an excessive need for attention and admiration. That being said, you know, we all sort of think we're going to know a narcissist when we see one. And this is true of the overt narcissists. So the ones that are really flamboyant, you know, the outspoken politicians or celebrities or whatnot. We all recognize those right off the bat. But the less obvious ones and the more subtle and frankly more dangerous ones are the covert narcissists. And these are, you know, the wolves in sheep's clothing, where what you see is not what you get. So these can be the people that seem really nice, that seem kind. They may be philanthropic or generous. They're the great guy, the good gal. But underneath, their intentions are exactly the same as the, you know, more obvious overt narcissist. So, and that is to gain power, control, domination, attention, and admiration. So those are the typical traits.
That's really great information. I just want to leave a caveat for the audience, as someone who has been in that type of relationship, but also just unhealthy relationships. They don't have to be a narcissist for you to leave if you're not happy, right? Like we all have I just want to put that in there. Like don't feel like you have to define them as a narcissist before it's okay to finally let go. I just want to put that out there because
I love that you mentioned that, because that is the absolute truth.
Yeah.
They don't need a label. They don't need a diagnosis. If you are in a toxic relationship or with a toxic individual, that's all you need to know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then at the other, you know, and then the other thing to look for is their actions. So generally speaking, if you're with a covert narcissist, their actions will not match their words. So they talk a good game, but again, what you see is not what you get. And so you want to look at their actions. Are there manipulative behaviors? Is there gaslighting? Is there a lack of accountability? Is there, criticism, nitpicking, all those sorts of things, which again, you don't need to be a narcissist to engage in abusive or toxic behaviors, as you
No,
say. Yeah.
definitely not. You also talked about how they're rarely diagnosed. And I want to ask this, and this is a little off the cuff, so this isn't, so I apologize if I put you on the spot. If you don't know the answer to this, don't worry. It's not, I'll edit it out if we need to, but I'm sure you probably will understand exactly what I'm talking about. Is one of the reasons that they say you do get a narcissist to therapy is one of the reasons, well, firstly, it's usually only in couples therapy, but don't narcissists also know how to play the game well? Like, don't they weaponize therapy talk and healing modalities in order to make it seem like they're the actual victim? Like, this is where victims get gaslit into, am I the narcissist? Right?
100%. It's
Yay, okay,
I can't nod any stronger. Yes, it's generally not recommended to go to therapy with a narcissist. They're good and they can bamboozle therapists unless the therapist is really knowledgeable about the tricks and tactics narcissists use. And case in point, my ex-husband and I went to 2 different marriage counselors over the years. Neither one recognized that he was a narcissist. I figured it out on my own. That's how good they are. Yeah. Yeah. So you are absolutely right. Yeah.
It's devastating. It's devastating. You're like, this is it. This is my help. Oh, they're not here to help. Oh. Whew. Okay, so are you able to share? So now you talked about your husband going to therapy. Are you willing to share a little bit about your personal story and how this became such a mission for you to help other people in these shoes that you found yourself in?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm a physician. I'm a retired pediatrician. So I'm pretty good at diagnosing. And I missed the diagnosis for 20 years. And I want to put that out there because one of the common feelings that people who have been in these kinds of relationships, especially if they've been long-term, is a real sense of shame and embarrassment. How could I have missed this? How did I not see the signs? And I just want to say, I was in this relationship for 20 years. I'm a doctor, and I didn't know I had been a victim of abuse. It can be that subtle and that insidious. So I just want to put that out there.
What I use, insidious. Yeah.
It's very insidious. It sneaks up on you and you don't see it coming. And it's like the frog in boiling water. You don't even realize it when you're in it until you're boiled alive, essentially. And so, yeah, I met my ex. I was 29, got married at 30. I was already a practicing pediatrician. So I had my professional life figured out. I thought I had all my ducks in a row. Mm-hmm. And he was a good guy, and if you still ask the people around him what he's like, they'll say, oh, great guy. He's the life of the party, the funniest guy in the room, seems nice, seems easygoing and mellow until, but it was the textbook sort of Jekyll and Hyde behind closed doors. What I was living and seeing was very different from what the outside world was seeing. And so it started off with the typical love bombing, which is the idealization phase, the honeymoon phase. He was in love with me. I was so wonderful. I was on a pedestal. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Everything was great. Okay. You're pinching yourself. Is this real? This is so incredible. And that's a red flag, actually. And then it very gradually devolved into the typical devaluing. So the nitpicking, the criticism. Why are you wearing sweats all the time? I mean, imagine I was criticized for wearing sweatpants around the house. I do this, I don't do that. Those sorts of things, which I remember actually asking him at one point, this was fairly early on. I said, do you not like me? That's a terrible feeling. It's a terrible feeling. And so I was subjected to the typical hot and cold behaviors. Of course I like you. I love you, this and that. And then turn around and I'm being criticized and ignored and neglected and undermined. And it was like this for 20 years. He moved out, believe it or not, 4 times. That's the discard. So the third phase so it's love bombing, devaluing, and then the discard, which is they either leave you physically or abandon you emotionally, ignore you. I was physically left 4 times. He'd move out for a few months. He wasn't happy, the whole, and then kind of gradually work his way back in. And it wasn't until the fourth time when I actually filed for divorce, but this took 20 years. And it was a 6-year period of him moving out and in. And interestingly, there are statistics that show that victims of any sort of domestic violence and any kind of abuse, even emotional abuse, is considered domestic violence. Tend to go back to their abuser 7 times. Okay, I went back 3. So not unusual. So the fourth phase, it doesn't always happen, but often does after the discard, is what they call the Hoover, where they suck you back in. So as I said, I went back 3 times. He sucked me back in 3 times, and we went through the whole cycle again, the honeymooning, the love bombing. What a relief. We're back together. This is going to work out. I'm going to try harder, do better. And I'm going to show him that this is where he needs to be and wants to be. And it wasn't until the 4th time he moved out that I really said, what am I doing? I'm going to keep living this for however many years. And I have 3 grown sons. Yes. They were teenagers at the time. And like many people, I didn't even file for divorce for myself. That's how beaten down and broken down and lost and confused I was. I looked at my ex and the background he came from. His father had done the same thing to his mother. And I looked at what he was doing to me and my children. And I said, oh my God, I am teaching my boys this is okay, and they will do this to their future wives. I cannot allow this to happen. So I actually filed for divorce for them, not for me. And that's not uncommon.
No, same. Absolutely. Absolutely. And good. I don't even like the term cycle breaker anymore. I like to say cycle starter. Like we're everyone's like, it's not about the ending. It's not about, it's about, no, like this ends here. Like the buck stops here. We're going to show a whole new way to live. And it was the same thing. I just pictured my kids in the same type of marriage I was in, and that my parents had for many years, and just like something's got to change. Like this cannot be the way we operate any longer, especially if we say we value human rights and we value these things. Well, the behavior behind that would be upholding those things and the actions that we take and the behaviors that we allow to exist in our lifetime, right? So thank you for sharing that. Thank you. So I know we've talked a lot about the red flags.
Oh, sorry, Chris. Can I say one more thing about that? Please. Because I think this is a really important point for anybody in your audience who this is resonating for them, and they're saying, but I don't know, I'm not ready, I'm not sure. So often, and I don't know if this pertains to you, but so often in these circumstances, even when we leave, it never feels like the right time because we're still bonded to this person, we're still attached, we still feel maybe love for them. So I want to be sure your audience understands that you don't have to, if it's a toxic or abusive relationship, you don't have to feel that it's 100% the right time to get out. So I just want to, it's a process.
It is a process. Someone with me said something very valuable, and it was like, well, you're just not ready yet. It won't get perfect, but one day you'll be ready and you'll know when that moment is. And it's really funny. I don't know if this was with you, but if I can share, for me, and it's something I write about sometimes, it's the last straw. And the last straw is always so insignificant, but it's just like, that was it. After all the years of whatever, being put down, criticized, walking on eggshells, being ignored, whatever, cold-shouldered all the time, whatever. It was the silliest, smallest thing that I was finally like, my brain checked out, and I'm like, that's it. We're going to the bank tomorrow. We're going to figure this out. Like, and it was because I'd had a bath, and I've been having lots of baths. That was my escape, was to go into the bathroom. And there was condensation after in the ceiling. And so we looked in the attic, something was dripping, and he's like, oh gosh, the fan ventilation, it's seeping. We got to fix that. And I'm like, okay, what do we do to fix it? He's like, first thing we do is we stop having so many baths. And I was like, even this is my fault? An old tube to the no, nope, not my fault. And I was so angry. He was like, oh, and I was like, nope. And it didn't matter what he said or did. I wasn't even like, there was no reaction. There was no more supply. It was just like, I was like this the rest of the time. There was no emotion. It just couldn't exist because that's when I'm like, okay, I don't know how we're gonna make this happen, but I'm ready now, ready to figure it out. So
So, so true.
do you hear that often where it's something like it's the small thing that finally is like, got it, and you snap, and the narcissist is
As
like,
you
this,
say,
this is why you're divorcing me?
it's
No.
the straw that breaks the camel's back because it's cumulative. Cumulative. It's not, with narcissistic abuse, it's death by 1,000 cuts
Yes.
because it's little things, it's little things, it's little things, and eventually it is the last straw. I love that example. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. You feel free to use it. I share it widely. So, uh, so we've talked a lot about some of the red flags and the things that you've experienced. What are some other things people can really look out for to really, maybe they're still in that, I'm not sure, or they're being gaslit and they're like, am I the problem? What are some sort of litmus test or things that people can do to really sort of start to analyze where they're at and what they may need to do for themselves?
Yeah. I think, one of the things I really like to focus on, is, they can be very stealth in their behavior. So it can be often hard to know, am I being gaslit? Is this really my fault? And I think at the end of the day, one of the biggest red flags is the sense that something's not right, that something's off. We forget to trust our gut. We live in our heads and we forget to trust our gut. And the thing about these relationships, and it doesn't have to be a narcissistic relationship, it can be
No, no,
any
no.
toxic or abusive relationship or unhealthy relationship, um, is to really go into our body and our gut. And it's like, how am I feeling? Because if you're feeling insecure, unsafe, confused, the sense you feel like who you are now is not who you were before, you've been beaten down, you feel depressed, anxiety, as you said, you feel like you're walking on eggshells, you're hyper vigilant. So I think it's really, really important to really dig into what you're feeling and to get professional help if you're not sure what you're feeling or what to make of it. And the other thing I like to also think about is, Brene Brown has a line where she talks about, what is the story I'm telling myself? And because we all do tell ourselves stories, no matter what we're dealing with, whether it's, our career choice, whether we want kids, don't want kids, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're telling yourself a story, I can't leave this relationship because I have children. Or if you're telling yourself a story, well, I told myself, well, he's got so much potential. He's going to get better. I know who he could be. That's a story I'm telling myself that, if you're telling yourself, I'll love him or her into treating me better. She's under so much stress. That's why she's doing this. So I think it's really important to not just look at the red flag behaviors, but to really look at your own feelings and what's going on in your gut, the sense that something's not right. And also ask yourself, what is the story I'm telling myself about this relationship?
Yes, I love that. There is a gut feeling and that's valid, right? It doesn't have to be tangible. It could be, hey, something's not adding up here with me. And I had a brilliant therapist at the time when I was going by myself, and they actually didn't approach like the emotional abuse side. They took it from, well, what do you need? What would you need to be happy? And we sort of started going through what I needed to have and then trying to work towards those things and realizing that those needs would ever be met. And then she was able to get into like the other stuff. So we really like tippy-toed into it, which was fabulous because it gave me a little voice to talk about little things without huge repercussions, right? So it was really brilliant advice. But yeah, to follow, you have the right to need what you need and watch for those little things. In hindsight, it was like if I could go back in time, the things I would look for is how they act in stress. So like you said, everything's happy and cheery and you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing to make them happy, everything's fine. But the minute something goes off kilter, or maybe you don't smile, or you wear the sweatpants instead of the dress to dinner, or maybe even dinner is not even made because you were busy with the kids, that's when to really see their behavior. How do they, if they get angry, are they getting angry at, are they lashing, or are they, right? Like it's that consistency of behavior that makes a big difference, isn't it?
You nailed it. And one of the litmus tests, if not the litmus test, is how does this person deal with conflict? I
Mhm.
say about my ex, he was the best fair weather friend. Um, and he was. And then I used to say, when the going got tough, he got going.
You got going. Yeah.
Could not deal with conflict. No, it's true. I love playing with words, but
Yeah,
um,
it's true. Yeah.
no, but that's absolutely true. Anybody, if you're living life on their terms and everything is going their way, and they're getting enough what they call narcissistic supply, which is the attention, the admiration, the adoration, the power, the sense of control, they can be perfectly lovely. But the minute you cross them, disagree with them, say, no, I'm not on board with that, that doesn't work for me, or you call them on their behavior, oh boy. So you are absolutely right. Because a healthy relationship can handle conflict or disagreement, or accountability is part of the equation. If both people will say, oh gosh, yeah, I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have said that, or, I should have done this or that, or, then you can have a discussion. But when one person either denies all responsibility or deflects and projects it onto you, so that you're left holding the bag, you can't have a healthy relationship with that person.
No, 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 definitely not. You made me think of another red flag that I didn't realize till I had the opposite of it was how do they greet you? So when they get home from work, when you get home from work, if you run into each other at the mall, like you both ended up doing errands and just happened to bump into each other, how do they greet you? I found that, sort of wondering and expecting either, cold shoulder or like what's for supper or even like stress like right off the bat, like and just like um to go from that to having someone that actually gets really excited and their face lights up even years later, right? Like there's just such a difference if they treat you like someone that they actually enjoy being around, they're gonna be that way, right? Like it's like it takes away the stress. So if I'm stressed, I look forward to when my partner comes home now because I know it's not going to add to. I know even if I've made a mistake, they're going to be like, "Hey, how do we fix it? What do we do?" Right? Like it's a collaboration. It's just such a different feeling. So that would definitely be a red flag if someone's like, "Oh, I'm just stressed. Don't take me seriously."
I'm
Once in a
laughing.
year is okay, but not definitely not disrespect.
Well,
Yeah.
they unload all their stress onto you for one
Yeah.
thing. But I'm laughing because I used to say my ex, he wanted the Mad Men's. I don't know if you guys watch Mad Men. He wanted the Mad Men scenario where he comes home from a, stressful day, and I'm supposed to greet him in a cocktail dress, all made up, with, my highest heels and a martini in hand, and the children will show up, beautifully, dressed, and hi, Daddy, how was your day? And then they promptly disappear, and he goes off and drinks his martini. Obviously, that doesn't happen in this day and age. That would have been his dream. So given that I did not greet him at the door wearing my highest heels and a martini in hand, he would go off and make himself a martini and pull out his mail and ignore the children and me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is his time. Yeah, yes. And surprising enough too is he married you already a pediatrician, right? Like if you marry someone that's successful, if you adore them, you would adore them for what they are and not, yeah.
That so in my, yes,
You would
it's
celebrate what you are, right? A
well, and in the
successful, strong
beginning,
woman. Yeah. Yeah.
he did, because in the beginning I was more successful career-wise than he was. So that was narcissistic supply because he could name drop my wife's a doctor. Oh, yes, he got instant credibility because I was a doctor. Now, as he became more successful in his field, um, and became more financially successful than I was told, you will love this one, at the end of my marriage, I realize now I don't necessarily need to be with a smart woman.
I'm laughing not because it's funny. It's just the audacity sometimes
It's
is
awful.
yeah.
But because he didn't need the narcissist, there was no more narcissistic supply for him to be married to a
Mm.
doctor because he was now successful on his own. So you are right, but
Or through
sometimes,
your support.
but they do, it's the same thing as having a beautiful trophy wife. If that trophy wife starts upstaging you, forget it.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, absolutely. That's, anyways, thank you for sharing that. It's always, and it's funny because people are like, it just doesn't make sense. It shouldn't make sense to you. It absolutely should not. If it made sense to you and you could, you know, tell yourself that, okay, I could see their point, that you wouldn't be healthy. Like it's not supposed to make sense. That's the secret, right? Is it's actually not supposed to make sense. They're
It
just very good
doesn't make
salespeople. Yeah.
none of it makes sense. And that's the craziness. And honestly, the word you hear thrown around, and I'm sure you can relate, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times, the word you hear the most with anybody who's been with a narcissist is crazy.
Yes.
I'm crazy. He made me feel like I was crazy. She tells me I'm crazy. Am I crazy? It is a crazy making experience because, as you say, it doesn't make sense until, and this is why knowing and understanding about narcissism and narcissistic abuse and their tricks and tactics, et cetera, is so important because once you understand it, it's not crazy because you know where they're coming from, you know what they're after, you know what motivates them, and you can go, oh, yeah, I know why he's doing that. Oh, now I get that. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy making.
Are narcissists, are they self-aware enough to know that they are doing, like, is it 100% on purpose, or have they even convinced themselves that this is how it's supposed to be? Like, do they understand the insidiousness to it, or is it a little more complex than that?
More complex. I mean, I would, I'd say most narcissists lack self-awareness because they're living from a false front.
Yeah.
So they're not in touch with their true self and where their vulnerabilities are and where their wounds are. So they're not really honest with themselves.
Yeah.
So you can't really expect them to be honest with you. But again, the self-awareness piece requires being honest with yourself. And that's, I mean, that's frankly one of the hard things for all of us to dig back our core wounds and the baggage and the stuff that we don't want to face. Narcissists will never go there. So, and again, by nature, they are deflectors, they blame shift, they don't take accountability. So, to really, you have to be self-aware in order to take accountability. And
Yes.
if everything is always blamed on other people, um, by definition, you're not very self-aware. So,
Perfect. Thank you. And one more question. So now let's say we realize it and it's time to leave, or it's time to change the relationship dynamic, whether that's a spouse, a workplace, a friend, a parent, even. Like narcissism, relationships occur in all those spectrums. Um, what do we do? How do we do it? And how can we make sure that we're protected? And like, how do we go about that? Starting to pull, like, especially because we know it's going to take a few times. What are sort of the steps we need to continue to make to keep ourselves safe and to keep ourselves moving towards valuing ourselves again and understanding we have the right to take up space?
yeah, and you use the key word. Number one is safety. So
Mhm.
depending on the situation, if you really are in physical danger or your children are in physical danger, that comes first. And you need to attend to that. So if somebody's in a narcissistic, abusive relationship in which they or their children are in danger, you will need to get other people involved, whether it's an attorney, et cetera. Middle people, you'll need a safety plan, an escape plan, those sorts of things. Um, Now, assuming that's not an issue,
Mhm.
um, number one is I think becoming aware of what the truth of the situation is, and accepting that this is an unhealthy situation. Even if you're not ready to leave yet, that is the first step, to admit to yourself this is and I have friends and I know people who are still in these relationships because for whatever reason they are not ready to get out, or maybe will never get out. I don't know. Um, but safety first. And I think, you know, becoming aware of what the truth of this situation is. And that's why I do believe knowledge is power. And then boundaries are so important. And this is especially true if you are dealing with a family member who is, you know, emotionally abusive or narcissistic, a colleague, a boss, even a neighbor. You know, you figure out where your boundaries are and how you can enforce them. And it doesn't necessarily mean threatening them. If you do this, I will do that. And if you do actually state that, you have to follow through or you lose credibility. But it may be even telling yourself, I'm not going to allow this person to talk to me this way. And if and when they do, you can just very calmly say, this is not acceptable. I would like to end this conversation and exiting. But boundaries are really, really important. Whether you leave or stay, really important. And then self-care is so important because in these relationships, they chip away at who you are and your sense of self. And, you know, we neglect ourselves. And so I think, you know, learning to focus on what we, as you mentioned earlier, what are my needs? And this person may not be able to meet them and probably won't ever. And so how can I meet them? And if I stay in this relationship, how can I get those needs met elsewhere, whether it's through friendships or activities or other people, whatnot. Therapy is I'm a firm believer in therapy or you know, coaching, especially, you know, there are trauma-informed coaches. There are coaches who are specialists in narcissistic abuse. But whether you stay or don't stay, you want to know what you're dealing with.
Yes, perfect. Can you talk about just real quickly, and I promise we'll wrap up shortly. I'm mindful of your time, so thank you. But could you just explain quickly what gray rocking is? Because that has been a very beneficial tool in the toolkit for myself and for a lot of people that I know that have been on the show that have had similar. They talk about that as like a really great tool, even in the workplace. Like, so can you share a little bit about that?
Gray rocking is a genius tool. So gray rock is essentially what it sounds like. So in some cases, we can cut off contact permanently and indefinitely with the person, and we never have to deal with them again. Ideally, that's the case. And, you know, I have narcissists in my past where I've never had to deal with them and never will. If, however, you do need to deal with a narcissist, either because you're co-parenting, you may own a business together, you may work for the person or see them at Thanksgiving dinner, the technique is, you know, ideally we go no contact if that's an option, but no contact is often not an option. I had to co-parent with my ex. Sounds like you probably did as well. So gray rocking is narcissists love getting a rise out of you. They want to trigger you. They want to push all your buttons because it feeds into their sense of power. Wow, look at the power I have. I can, you know, if I push the button, I can make you jump. I can make you squirm. I can make you cry, react. No attention is good attention. You know, any attention is good attention for a narcissist. So what gray rock is if you think about a gray rock, it's inert, it's boring, it's dull, it doesn't react, it doesn't respond. And so gray rocking is essentially taking that response. It's no emotional reaction, just the facts, ma'am. So if your narcissist asks you a question or there's an issue with the children, you give them the facts. You do not respond to anything emotionally. You don't let them know where you're coming from. You become boring, dull, because they will lose interest. Once they realize they can't get a reaction out of you, they will go elsewhere for that reaction. They no longer have power over you. I remember the very first time I was already split from my ex-husband, and we were on the phone talking about my children, and he started venting to me about his work situation, which was a very toxic situation. And I very calmly said, you know, we're not together anymore. I think you'll need to vent to somebody else. And he was stunned because I said, no, I'm not interested anymore. And I said it very calmly, just the facts, no reaction. And he went elsewhere. So that's what gray rocking is, a brilliant technique. And it's really important if you need to deal with somebody who wants to trigger you.
Yes. I like to say They've bought a ticket to a ride. I don't need to get on with them.
Love
not
it.
my roller coaster today. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, neutral. You're just neutral. Neutral, like a robot.
Yes. So how can people find you, work with you? What type of things are you doing in the communities and around you to get this message out to people and make sure that they have support?
So my book is currently out for submission. It's called Decoding Narcissism because, as we talked about, you really do have to play detective to a large degree. Decoding Narcissism, and it's Decoding Narcissism, a survivor's guide from A to Z. It's essentially an encyclopedia. It's a fun encyclopedia of everything that has to do with narcissism. So, for instance, gray rocking, gaslighting, hoovering, love bombing, anything and everything narcissism. My website is www.valeriesussman.com. And I have some blogs on there. My Substack, I have more. I need to move some of them over to my website. They haven't gone yet. But my Substack, I have several blogs on that. It's valeriesussman.substack.com. I have a fun Instagram with some really
Do
informative
you make
videos.
those miniatures? I gotta ask you, do you make those miniatures? That's your play? We didn't even talk about the play. Oh, I have to have you back on. Let's talk about playing. But you
This
make
is
those, those are
this,
so please go to her Instagram. We'll have everything in the show notes, but you have to see
yeah.
her.
So my art is all about narcissism for the Decoding Narcissism book. Like I said, I have each letter embellished with, oh, let's see. So this is the letter F, and so you're telling yourself a fairy tale. That's the F, the frog in boiling water, the fantasy island. So this is the art that goes with my book, the freedom, because ideally we all find freedom. So this is part of my art. That was a huge part of my healing, was
Oh my God, those are beautiful.
making art. Not all, but I'm in the process of putting some of my gallery. I have hundreds of pieces of art
Mhm.
onto my gallery on my website. So yeah, my Instagram is Valerie Sussman _creative.
Mhm.
Some of my art is there as well. Yeah, yeah.
It's
And I
gorgeous. Yeah.
my creativity and play for healing.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. Like I was scrolling and I lost track of time. Like, oh, I gotta find the questions because it was just so eye-catching, all of it. It was so interesting. So
I
beautiful.
think again, it's if we can laugh while we're healing, and if we can laugh while we cry, it's really powerful.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much for your time, Valerie. It was just such a pleasure speaking with you. And we'll definitely have to have you on again to talk about play because that's one of my favorite topics as well.
Oh, me too. Yay.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.